saw it.
Yep.
Start with you, big guy.
Yep.
Jason. Why did you want to become a journalist? What was it about?
Why did I want to become a journalist?
Yeah, what was it about becoming a journalist that was
I bombed in my first math class in college.
Okay.
And then a friend said, hey man, you read the newspaper every day and you love sports. And he said, you should be a sports writer.
Okay.
And as soon as he said it, I was like, damn, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's not work. I would be covering sports. I love sports. I'd just be going to sporting events and writing about them. And so I thought, wow, that beats working.
Sure.
And so I switched my major my freshman year to journalism.
Freshman year, that was real quick. So you was
Yes.
good. You know how to adapt.
One semester.
You know,
Right.
that's pretty
Quick
quick.
learn.
So what was your aha moment? What was the moment you felt like this is the industry is for you? This is a good. You gave me some of the reason why you liked it, but what was that aha moment to see I can be successful in this industry?
What I always thought was that I could provide a different perspective. My aha moment actually was just like my years of reading newspapers as a kid. I was a huge Indiana Pacer fan, and I didn't like the way my newspaper covered the Pacers.
Oh wow!
And because I always felt like, oh man, they're writing these stories for the players and the coaches. They're not thinking about me, the reader.
Okay.
And so as a kid, I felt that instinctively. I used to complain to my dad and mom about it. And then when I switched to journalism, my thing I thought I was going to bring to the table was, at all times, I'm going to write for the readers. There's far more of them than there are people on the teams.
Gotcha.
And so I just always felt like that would be unique in the newspaper industry.
When you speak of this, when you speak of writing for the readers, are you looking for a fan's perspective, or you said you were an Indiana basketball fan? Were you trying to bring that fan's perspective, or were there something in there lacking that you were just trying to bring out from the players or the organization?
I saw the role of the media and the newspaper was to hold my teams accountable.
Okay.
And so as a fan, that's what I wanted. There were questions I wanted the coaches and athletes asked that I felt like reporters weren't. And as a fan, I wanted those questions asked. That's what I try to do. Have a conversation or ask the questions or write the opinions or get at the issues that fans want discussed and talked about and probed. That's been my shtick or point of view throughout my entire career.
Well, it served you well, right?
Yes, sir.
It served you well. So talk about receiving the Scripps Howard Foundation Award for your commentary on sports. Talk about kind of what that meant to you and how that was received kind of back at home.
Without question, that's my highest achievement as a journalist. The Scripps Howard Award, in terms of prestige, is just below the Pulitzer Prize, and a lot of people said it's like the award that predicts that you're going to win the Pulitzer, because a lot of times people win the Scripps Howard and then a year or two later they're given the Pulitzer Prize. And so for me, I was the first sports writer to win the Scripps Howard Award for commentary. And so that to me was my crowning achievement and validation of my entire approach as a sports writer.
Sweet. Congratulations on that award. When did TV become part of your plan for you?
It fell into my lap. I think in 1999, 2000, I became friends or acquainted with Jeremy Schaap.
Okay.
And Jeremy Schaap was Dick Schaap's son. And Jeremy Schaap said to his dad, hey man, you should have Jason on the sports reporters. And he's a guy in Kansas City that's doing good things. And so that's what got me on national TV. On local TV in Kansas City, I had been doing a commentary, a monologue once a week for a station in Kansas City, a local station. It was just something I wanted to try, just to add to what I was doing. I've always felt, my dad always said, have multiple streams of income. Never be relying on one person, so I just wanted to pick up the skill.
Yeah, so you've been pretty successful at that as well. You enjoy that just as much as you have radio or some of the writing you've done for the sports teams?
I'm not going to lie. In terms of enjoyment, I enjoy nothing more than writing. Nothing will ever compare to writing. I do think this is funner.
Okay.
This is healthier. Writing is a very lonely endeavor. It's just you and a computer and your thoughts. Television is a group team effort, and it's much better for you life enjoyment-wise, doing TV and working with a team and working with others.
But you're Whitlock, you still get to write every
Yes,
you still get to
that's
write
yes.
every day. What's the most impactful, since you've been covering sports for a long time, what's the most impactful change you've seen in sports since you started covering it? I'm not going to go back to...
Sports media, what's the most impactful change?
Just in sports in general, since you start covering it. I don't want to talk about...
Well, I think there's been two things that have impacted sports hugely. The amount of television money injected into sports and the amount of money the athletes make has really changed sports in a dramatic way. I think it's changed the athletes. I think it's changed the way we cover the athletes. I think it's changed everything. You know, everything now is TV driven. When I was in college, we played 11 games, and now kids are playing as many as 15 games. So all of that stuff has changed. And then I think here in the last 5 to 10 years, social media has changed the sports media and sports in a big way. It's had a big impact on the athletes. That platform, that stage on social media for a lot of athletes, they prioritize over the actual stage they play on. They're more worried about their individual brands and their social media brands, a lot of times, in my opinion, more so than their brand as a football or basketball player.
Got it. Do you feel the same as a former athlete? Would you agree with them?
No. But I mean, we talk a lot about maturation, exposures. I think you're seeing a more fully developed athlete. The aspirations of yesterday's athletes are now being exampled through what we see today. Michael Jordan, even though he's looked at as the GOAT, had efforts to being what these guys are actually materializing. So someone has to lay the bricks down, then someone walks on them, and then you walk on their shoulders, stand on their shoulders. You have different viewpoints, advantages, but I understand what he's saying, and I respect it. It's just, I think that we're just more fully developed, and in 20 years we'll laugh at these athletes who used to be locked into their phones on social media. There'll be something else happening in virtual reality that will change the game as well.
It kind of opens up the world to everybody, so it kind of make the world a smaller place. Is that kind of something what you're getting at, or?
No, because I think that, you know, the internet has had some amazingly positive effects, and I think it's had some negative ones as well. I think it's damaged our ability to communicate with each other. I think that we do so much communicating over social media that, and so much of it is negative and tearing down, that, and people think of that as reality. And then when take your social media away, take your phones away, and just go out and have dinner with people and interact with people in your everyday working, and it's a completely different interaction than the tension and the hostility we see in social media. So I think some of the things I'm saying about athletes, I think are applicable to the rest of society as well. You know, I think a lot of human beings think of social media as their platform to show the world who they are, when you actually really show the world who you are in your real life interactions.
Right. Yeah, sir. It's such a small, you made this point last week, it's such a small microcosm of who you are,
right,
that to think we know somebody because of a couple of tweets or media posting. Let's change the subject. I would like to ask you, what's the most impactful change in sports that you've seen or endured?
Just the infusion of the money and the salaries. It's dollar-centric now, and everything else comes off of that. The exposures, industries, cottage industries like what we do. When I entered athletics as a youngster, even then it seemed distant as a reality to become a professional athlete. I was just a kid saying, they play on TV, we play in our yard, and never thinking of the connection. And as you start to mature and play the game, you start to get introduced to the big business. But even then, it wasn't big business like it is today. They're trying to go to cable TV and try to go to live coverage instead of tape delay. And then that translates into now where guys like us and former athletes and journalists could just talk about it and get paid like the athletes that do it. Like, it's funny, when you're in an industry and you talk and there are no surgeries, no pain, no stats, and then you look at the salaries of some of the rosters and you fit conveniently in there, and you're like, what is going on here? So it's just the infusion of the money, and then the awareness, the exposure, everything that comes from it.
So safe to say you're not missing practice and
No, oh man, as we've been through the battles, especially in the trenches. Sure. It's a different animal out there, so I take the air-conditioned studio over that.
Yeah, it's pretty nice over there too. Both of you guys, what are some of the best lessons you learned? Now, I know you played at Ball State and obviously Columbia in the league. What are some of the best lessons you learned from sports that kind of helped you in your position as you transition to your second career and as you transition from a journalist to today? What are some of the best lessons you learned in sport, from sports?
Yeah, toughness. The days when you couldn't walk in the stadium, but for 3 hours you're going to give your maximum physical effort, and the days where you're bleeding, hurting, inside or outside, and you still had to suck that up to perform. You could easily translate that to the real world and the work ethic and work habits. So I would think that it just builds a layer on you. You get callous to complaints. You know, I don't want to hear that, because a double day with Bill Parcells is going to be tougher than anything that Fox Sports ever asked me to do. And I don't want them to challenge that, but at the same time, you know, my harder days in terms of exertion hopefully are behind me.
Okay. For me, I think most of my values and life philosophies come from either the church or from sports. And so from sports, I would just say that the number one thing I try to apply, how sports lives in me every day, is anytime I have a problem or something goes wrong, the first person I question is myself. And so I believe all solutions start from within. And I got a lot of that from, it's a combination of the church and sports. Coaches stand in front of their teams and constantly, we got a problem, we got to fix it in here. Don't worry about outside noise. Don't worry about what the fans think or what the media thinks or the other team thinks. Control what you can control and we'll be fine. That is from sports, and it's also, in my view, from the Bible and from the church in terms of, you know, if God's on your side, how can you fail? And so I try to say, me and God working together can overcome all obstacles. That's a church sports philosophy.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I hope you got that, man. Talk to me about Columbia. I always wanted to, as just a sports fan in general, I always wondered why Marcellus, this athlete from Compton, chose Columbia.
Yeah.
That questioned me for a lot of years. And then listening to you on the radio with Max for years, I was hoping that you would kind of express that. I read your book. I read some of the portions in your book where you talk about Columbia making that decision. Talk about the pressure that you felt, and that was something I was unaware about. The pressure you felt to kind of bring your family out of where they were, and then Columbia, kind of how you chose Columbia, that pressure you felt, and then kind of, it's obviously paid you well, but kind of talk about that transformation.
Yeah, being in the neighborhood, we all know that the promoted outlets are athletics and entertainment, and I didn't want to do that in a traditional respect. So it was a branding concept at first. All the athletes were looked at as the meatheads in class and the dumb jocks. But I was always eager to learn. I was always a good student, so I had a balancing act. So I never bought into the identity that I could be a great athlete and forget about my studies. So when I had opportunities to go to the big name schools in college, I remembered that branding, and I remember the statistics and how they try to put that stigma on everyone from the hood. You're going to make it out, but you probably come back if you make it out. And on top of that, I didn't want people to perceive me as just a dumb jock. And that's an uphill climb. If you go to certain places, certain schools, people just don't give you the same respect, whatever they may think. So it was really that conversation that I had with people that I respected. Not my peers. My peers were like, go to the big school. Yeah, stop. Like, go to the best football factory.
That was another question of mine, but okay.
Yeah. No, not my peers. I had to really, quote unquote, sacrifice some of the adoration and love that you would get from being at a big football school to go to a small school, but playing a long game. I never felt pressure. I felt a responsibility. That pressure comes when you have an option. You know, you're like, oh, we can win this game, or we can lose it. Oh, we better play well. That's kind of a pressure. I couldn't lose the game I was playing. I had my family on my back. I was responsible for our family to make it out. So it was heavy, but it didn't feel like a pressure because I knew I couldn't fail and I had to succeed at it. So from there, man, once you make it out, of course, everyone applauds you, pats you on the back. Great decision, best of both worlds. But there were moments where I questioned even the decision, absolutely, thinking I should have went somewhere else, have a bigger spark, bigger platform, and make it to the NFL off the yellow brick road. But it worked out.
So, just a side question. So playing football and being successful on the football field at Columbia, was that a concern, or were you just thinking strictly education?
It was a concern because no one cared about my film. So 5 sacks against Harvard, who gives a damn? Those accountants. You know, that's not the NFL. So yeah, it was an issue. I knew I had to perform well in the measurables. I had to do well in the combine, East-West All-Star game against the top competition. So where everyone else knew it was an All-Star game, to me it was life or death. My finals.
This is it.
Yeah, if I'm gonna make it to the league, I gotta dominate against you.
Got you. So talk to me about your transition into your second career, kind of why you chose this field. I know you've got some other stuff going on I hope to touch on later on, but why you chose this particular field and kind of how that transition took about and took shape.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds amazing to be retired at the age of 32, but it's a lonely place as well, you know? You make up errands to run because your friends are all working and, you know, I'm just riding around aimlessly. Didn't find the same purpose post-retirement that I desired. I thought I was just going to party, hang out, check bank receipts, chill. That gets lonely, and I had more to fulfill in life than just that. So 8-9 months goes by, and I do random interviews for ESPN like I did countless times as a player.
Sure. And
that was the first time I found the same level of passion, energy when the light turned on. 3, 2, 1, click. I was like, interesting. Kind of feels like going out the tunnel and 80,000 screams. Close enough, you know? And I just started to run with it. It snowballed from there. And I always had a huge passion for translating the game. Because I always thought that this can come or this can go. I was a player that came from a small school, so who knew if it was ever going to come to fruition? So when it did, I was kind of more relatable to the casual fan. I was the one that would talk to the fans more about the game. I wouldn't give the mumble interview. I would actually tell them what happened, and that built me a lot of equity in the media.
Segment, your That Dude segment. No.
Emmy Award winner.
You trademarked that. You've been carrying that one along, right?
Damn right.
You carried that one. So is that where that's kind of spawned That Dude was from your desire to talk about the game and educate people on the game?
And also the spirit of the unheralded, the ones who don't get enough attention, love, usually in the trenches, especially during football season. The ones out there making it happen, but not a lot of people talk about them. So the spirit of that, a deeper focus on what's really happening behind the first layer.
Well, everybody needs to kind of see that deeper dive into it. I like to see the all 22. I love to sit down and watch that all 22 with you, so I can learn something as well. Kind of both of you guys, we all had experience that kind of shaped our approach to life or our experiences. What were the most impactful experiences that helped shape your approach to life, both of you guys?
Shape my approach to life?
Yeah. Well, some experience that kind of good or bad, I mean, just kind of help shape you who you are and make you some of who you are.
The two things that shaped my approach to life would be my grandmother, my mother's mother. She was the religious foundation of our family. And then it would just be the work ethic of my mother and father. You know, my parents divorced when I was about 5 years old. My mother and my brother and I moved into a little spot in the hood, and my mother, our apartment got broken into in the hood when me and my brother were all visiting my father. My mother wakes up and there's a dude climbing through our window. She never tells us the story, but she takes a second job immediately, and 6 months later we moved to a working class neighborhood. And that happened when I was in about 3rd or 4th grade. And then my mother's work ethic and just the way she carried me and my brother and made all kinds of sacrifices, and that instilled a lot in me. And then my father, his independence, his stubbornness, he worked at Chrysler factory job when I was young, and he was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X on his lunch break, and they complained. His supervisor's like, "Why are you reading And my father's like, "Okay, I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna start my own business. Ain't nobody gonna tell me what I can read." And so my father was an entrepreneur in the hood my entire life, and built a nice little life for him where he was happy. He liked being around black folks. He liked being close to his businesses. He built a brand new home in the hood, not far from his little bar that he ran. And just my father's independent, I'm going to do for myself, and I'm going to create a little bubble for me that I'm happy in America, and screw everybody else. My mother's work ethic, my father's independence, my father's balls, both of them have big balls. That has shaped my life perspective.
That also had that influence your approach, your delivery on the show, and when you talk
Without question, I think without question.
Yes.
My mother is one of the most outspoken people in the world, more outspoken than I am. My mother's almost 80 now, dependent on me, not in financially dependent on me, but gets around with. She will tell me whatever the hell she wants to tell me. She'll argue with me about whatever the hell she wants to argue with me about, and dare me to do anything about it.
Okay. And you for you?
I think one was just it felt like the elements in my community, a lot of the diversity that I saw people facing. It was really the low ambition. A lot of people with a ton of talent. Even my mother, a straight A student, but had to turn her focus inward on the family. She had 2 kids by the age of 19. And to see that there is talent unrealized around you in your family, and to have these few skills, few talents that I had at a young age, and realize that I got to materialize them for this world, because my family has sacrificed so much to build us up. Like he said, outspoken family, never lacked for confidence, never shied away from any obstacle. At the same time, things didn't work out. They weren't living out their dreams necessarily. They had jobs, not careers, and I could feel that they aspired for more, but they cared so much about us that they kind of turned that attention inward. So I wanted to use that love, use that support, use that confidence, and to go out there and do something in this world and bring us all along. So I would say that more so than anything, it's just a shaping of a mindset that gave me energy.
That's pretty cool, guys. When you guys kind of talk about the future, the development of the show, was there something lacking that a spot you wanted to fill? You talked about you becoming a journalist because you wanted to talk to the Pacers, get on the Pacers, and get on the organization, hold them accountable. Was there a spot position lacking when you think of Speak for Yourself that you guys kind of want to fill collectively?
I don't want to minimize what's being done in other shows, but I felt like there's a higher level of conversation that could be had, particularly from a black point of view. I don't think the full spectrum of black perspective is reflected oftentimes in the mainstream media, and I felt like, just to be quite honest, I didn't feel like there was a place for men to be men and to be responsible men. There's all this talk about toxic masculinity. Well, I do think there's some responsible masculinity that people are attracted to and is necessary to have in a healthy society. And so I wanted to be a part of something where responsible men could have a responsibly masculine conversation. I think there's real value in that.
And for me, is to echo a lot of that, but watching the coverage of sports, because it's become its own industry and it's starting to divide, I think, from the essence of what goes on in the locker room, the essence of what the athletes are feeling, thinking, and how they maneuver. I've always felt the responsibility to do that, more so than be the hot take show or be the hot take broadcaster, just to translate things that maybe aren't popular. Maybe not everyone is thinking, but this is what the athletes would think of it if I could take that tally, take that polling every day. So kind of being a reflection of the voice that is still in that locker room, but a lot of times head down on that phone. So, you know, a lot of it's getting lost now, the disconnect. You can see it from the athlete's point of view. Watch them do an interview. They don't even look at the reporter anymore. Watch them do an interview. They talk in short sentences, cliches, or they get up out of there because the disconnect is happening. Right. You know, I don't need you to take care of me. If you talk about my game, talk about it. You talk about my name, that's a difference. But even then, it's becoming independent more than interdependent. And there was a day where I liked that linkage. So at times I try to be the bridge from that place to what people are saying at home.
Okay. Hey man, I think my time is running short.
Oh, it's short. It's gone. My wife's birthday.
I'm sorry.
I've never been up here this late.
Real quick, man. Thank you guys for allowing me to have a few moments with you. My article is going to come out. What's good in sports? LA News Observer. And I just can't appreciate your time enough.
There you go.
And I got follow-up questions, but we'll get to you later.
Oh, yeah.
Enjoy your time with your birthday.
Appreciate it.